So now we have question 12 from the SAT number 9. And question 12 says the information about statistical measurement and lines 23 through 27, right here. So the information about statistical relationships in lines 23 to 27 is presented in order to. So what we need to do is we need to go back for this question. We need to go back to lines 23 through 27, and we need to look for what it is that these lines serve to do, right? What are they? How do they contribute to the passage? So let's go back up here. So 23:27 says, statistically speaking. Let's get rid of this shit here. Okay. Statistically speaking, you measure relationships like these with a correlation where perfect correspondence yields a correlation of 1 and no correspondence yields a correlation of 0. The closer the correlation to 1, the stronger the relationship. So we got to ask ourselves pretty much what is it that is going on here? What's the point of what we have right here? And it seems to say that probably the point is that they're explaining what correlation is, right? And they're explaining that basically the correspondence between perfect and imperfect, right? The correspondence between, what does it say up here? A perfect correspondence between predicted and actual ratings versus no correspondence between the two. Basically, this is explaining what that is. So correlation is saying when you have perfect correspondence, you have closer to 1. When you have no correspondence, you go closer to 0. So what's the point about telling us about this? It's really just sort of like an explanation of a term, right? It's an explanation sort of like of the way that things are going to be measured. It's a little scientific aside, right? Meant to give us some more information about what correlation is. So let's see if we have an answer choice that will match that idea. A says correct a common misunderstanding. So this part right here should stand out to us. Correct a common misunderstanding. So the way that it's presented is it's not presented as a misunderstanding. That would have to be presented as, a lot of people misunderstand, or a lot of people don't quite know, or a lot of people misjudge how correlation works, right? So it does tell us how researchers quantify certain data from other experiments, but it's not presented as a common misunderstanding. And what you want to do is sort of take things at face value. So if lines 23 to 27 is what's being cited here, if they themselves don't specify that this is commonly misunderstood, we shouldn't layer in our own opinion. Maybe we think that correlation is misunderstood. Maybe we read something else in the rest of the passage that might suggest this to us. But in this case, it should be presented in lines 23 to 27. We can get rid of A. B, forestall potential objections. To be honest, I'm already sort of done with this answer choice just based on this part, the potential objections part. So when you're trying to forestall or prevent potential objections, the way that you phrase it is almost defensively. You will start by saying, some critics might say, or critics might argue, or one point of contention, or whatever, it might be this. But they don't start with that. It's a very neutral, very factual explanation. And let's continue. Anyway, so forestall potential objections to how data were analyzed in the study. Again, it's not even exactly how data were analyzed, although that might be splitting hairs. It's really more about how the data was measured, right? How the correspondence was measured, and it's about the sort of the scientific term. So we're not gonna choose B because they're not forestalling potential objections, and it's not about how they were analyzed. C says draw attention to a pattern evident in the conclusion of the experiments. Draw attention to a pattern evident in the conclusion of the experiments. So let's understand what this means here. The way that I interpret this, to draw attention to a pattern evident in the conclusions, would be to be already talking about the findings of the study. And if you remember from the passage, the findings of the study basically say that people are good at knowing how groups think about them, but not so good at knowing how individuals think about them. So that might be the pattern that they're drawing attention to. But if we know 23 through 27, they don't talk about the pattern specific to the findings of the experiments. They're talking about the general use of correlation on a scale of 0 to 1 to measure correspondence, right, as a statistical measurement. So C is not right because we're talking more general, we're not talking specifically about the conclusion of the experiment. Then D says provide context for the ways in which the results of the experiment will be discussed. And this is pretty much exactly what we want, right? Because it is providing context for the way in which results of experiments will be discussed, because it's telling us that here's how everything is going to be measured using correlation, right? Correlation of 1 means this, correlation of 0 means that. The stronger the relationship, X, Y, Z. So for that reason, D is going to be our answer choice for this question.